We couldn't stop talking about the RNC without mentioning one of the best and most memorable speeches from the night, everyone's favorite neocon, Nikki Haley, bending the knee to the man that she told us we should not vote for. So I've cut some of it down for brevity, but we're going to play a solid portion of the speech and then I'll give my thoughts and commentary.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. Our country is at a critical moment. We have a choice to make. For more than a year, I said a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. After seeing the debate, everyone knows it's true. If we have 4 more years of Biden or a single day of Harris, our country will be badly worse off. For the sake of our nation, we have to go with Donald Trump. But there's more to it than that. We should acknowledge that there are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them. And I want to speak to them tonight. My message to them is simple. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree. For those who have some doubts about President Trump, I want to tell you a few things about the Commander-in-Chief I know and worked with. As Ambassador to the United Nations, I had a front row seat to his national security policies. We sure could use those again. Think about it. When Barack Obama was president, Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea. With Joe Biden as president, Putin invaded all of Ukraine. But when Donald Trump was president, Putin did nothing. No invasions. No invasions, no wars. That was no accident. Putin didn't attack Ukraine because he knew Donald Trump was tough. A strong president doesn't start wars. A strong president prevents wars. Then look at the Middle East. Every problem in that part of the world can be laid at the feet of Iran. The dictators who chant death to America are the bankrollers and weapons suppliers for Hamas and Hezbollah. They're behind the barbaric massacres and the hostage-taking. Once again, compare Trump and Biden. Trump got us out of the insane Iran nuclear deal. He imposed the toughest sanctions ever on Iran. And he eliminated the arch-terrorist Qasem Soleimani. Iran was too weak to start any wars. They knew Trump meant business, and they were afraid. And then there's Joe Biden. He lifted the sanctions. He begged them to get back into the nuclear deal. He surrendered in Afghanistan. He sent every possible sign of weakness. Even now, while Hamas is still holding Americans hostage, Biden is pressuring Israel instead of the terrorists. Between Israel and Hamas, Donald Trump is clear about who is our friend and who is our enemy. Then look at the border. It's the single biggest threat Americans face. Under Joe Biden, migrants are coming into our country by the thousands every day. We have no idea who they are, where they end up, or what they plan to do. And let me remind you, Kamala had one job, and that was to fix the border. Now imagine her in charge of the entire country. Under Donald Trump, we didn't have the border disaster we have today, and we won't when he is president again. Let us join together as a party. Let us come together as a people, as one country, strong and proud. Let us show our children and the world that even on our worst day, we are blessed to live in America. God bless you. Thank you. God bless the United States of America.
I have to admit, out of any person that gave a speech in support of Trump, hers probably was the most convincing sounding. And let me clarify that. It didn't convince me to support him. But I guess when you know the context of this person ran against Trump, came in second place in the primary, you are more tempted to, I guess, hear them out, listen to them. So you have the line in there about how, I was one of the first that predicted that. I kept saying, a vote for Biden is a vote for Harris. It's like, okay. A lot of people in recent weeks have been calling for Biden to step down, and unfortunately, there are a lot of indications that he is unwilling to do that. And Democrats are worried about what will happen if he has more, mental acuity issues while campaigning and whatnot, or, possibly after getting another term. But what I did notice is that she has this almost seething, and again, I get it, like, you're trying to make the other side sound bad, but at the very least, when she talks about Biden, you can point to 4 years as senator, 30-something years, 4 years as president, and then 30-something years as senator. There's like a record there. The only actual policy-specific criticism she had of Harris was that she was put in charge of immigration as VP, a position that is notoriously giving of no power to the person that has it. And when she claims that the border, that immigration is the most important, is the biggest threat facing Americans, which we'll get into that later, she makes sure to say Kamala had one job. It's like, yeah, but Harris doesn't have the power to override whatever Biden's immigration policy is. Not to mention, it's really not that much different from Trump's. ICE is still around. Deportations are still a thing. It's really sad that they try to act like there are differences when there are not. Now, when we go over to her mentioning of Obama being in office when, Russia and Crimea, annexed Crimea, or whichever way, and her mentioning that, Putin's invasion of Ukraine took place during Biden's tenure, she's trying to present this idea that when you put a Democrat as president, because now it's going further back than either the Trump or Biden eras, somehow this is deferential for foreign countries to decide to go after someone else. And she says, if Trump was still there, this wouldn't have happened. Like, well, what causes you to believe that? I mean, there's been tensions between Russia and Ukraine for years. In fact, a lot of people actually mocked Trump for how soft he appeared to be towards Putin. And I don't want to get into the Russiagate stuff because, that's dealing with elections and whatnot. And it really just comes down to, U.S. relations with Russia were friendlier, I'd say, under Trump than they were under either Obama or Biden. But that, in many cases, was due to the fact that there was no invasion, which you still cannot give me a legitimate reason as to why the U.S. president not being a Democrat would somehow have stopped this conflict from happening. And of course, in the same stupid speech, you go from saying, a strong president doesn't start wars, a strong president prevents wars. It's like, lady, you mentioned later on in this same address that Trump ordered the assassination of the Iranian general Soleimani. Maybe she was asleep that week. Maybe she was passed out for all of that month. It was a little bit before the virus happened, so maybe the virus took attention for her. But I remember nonstop the fear that people had that this would stoke a conflict with Iran. It was an extremely aggressive act that really, by like an act of, I hate to say divine intervention, we didn't see a conflict, you know, between the U.S. and Iran start over it, because Iran had every reason to be upset with us and to, try to make this go even further than it already was. So that already is like, are you kidding me, lady? But then also, it's like you tried to do this coup in Venezuela where you wanted to name who the president was, do a regime change, and that could have started a conflict. Just a really... I don't have a problem with people trying to make the case for Trump, right? Oh, I think he's going to bring back jobs, lower gas prices. But some of these speeches, it's like they're living in some kind of alternate universe. Like, they say things that just are not true. And you don't have to be some big Biden-loving Democrat to see it. Just pay attention and follow this stuff, and you'll see all of the faults and insanity in the things that they say. And of course, my favorite line was that the border is the biggest threat to Americans. And it's like, isn't it sad that we live in a country where most Americans can't afford $1,000 emergency? Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. We haven't had an increase in the minimum wage in over 10 years. And this ambassador, presidential candidate, silver spoon in her mouth for probably the last 20 or 30 years of her life, lady, is going to tell you that the most important threat to you are a bunch of immigrants. I mean, just a sad state of affairs. Because like I said, this is one of the two major political parties. This lady, she could have been the next nominee if Trump wasn't there. If she still performed the way that she did, there is a solid chance she might have been the Republican nominee this time around. And that's the person who's going to sit here and tell you that the border is a bigger issue than if people have a damn job or not, or can afford to eat. Utterly insane. Now, of course, the part of this speech that everyone is lamenting about, and there are even some comments I've seen where people are, feeling so betrayed. I trusted you, Nikki. How could you do this? You gotta understand, Haley is a careerist. She's someone who wants to either run for president again in 2028 or, is still seeking some kind of probably elected office. And she knows that she's not going to get that by opposing Trump and running off with the rest of the never MAGA group within the GOP. Someone like Christie, who's done running for things, he doesn't care, whatever. That's why he didn't even go to the convention. But Haley, as a careerist, is thinking, okay, well, if Trump wins this time around, I can be his Secretary of State or his defense secretary or some other position she can get herself. I was even saying that if she didn't run this time around, I think she actually would have been a pretty strong contender for VP, but be that as it may. She wants to run for some other office. She doesn't want her career to be over, so she's going to do the same thing that Cruz did back in 2016, except at an accelerated pace where she's going to bend the knee. And that's exactly what you saw with this goofy speech. And really, I've said this before. I think that if somebody wants to be president of the United States, if they want to hold the highest office in the land, they have to have just a little shred of integrity and have a tiny bit of courage. And you don't see that with these politicians. They're so afraid of this one old man that when they run against him, they're very careful of how they're going to criticize him. Haley didn't really start criticizing Trump until very late into that race after voting was already underway. And even after telling us about how, Trump was weak in the knees on Ukraine, how Americans weren't going to vote for a convicted felon to be their nominee. It's like you still come out and back him because you have no spine, you have no conscience. All you care about is how many votes you can get. And unfortunately, a lot of the Trump backers have such crappy memories that give it 8 years, they will forget that primary. Look at what they do with Cruz. They're talking about, well, they're saying this for Vance, but they're talking about Cruz as a potential successor to Trump. They will say the same thing about Haley if she spends the next 4 to 8 years bending the knee, which it's very likely she's going to do after giving this tongue bath of an address at that stupid convention. And it's so sad that like people get excited for these politicians. Like she actually has, or rather had, supporters in that primary, 4 million votes, who were like, yeah, we're sick of Trump. She was getting 20% of the vote even after dropping out. And the culmination of all of this anti-Trump stuff from her was after winning one state, she's going to give this speech in full throttle support of him. You don't have to agree with him on everything. Well, the way you made it sound, you didn't agree with him on damn near anything. But that's why I said they have no actual conscience. They're just pathetic. The disgrace of South Carolina. Well, besides Nancy Mace.